Hello and welcome to our session called Teaching English in Changing Times. My name is Nina Lauder and I will be your speaker for the next half hour or 40 minutes. Okay, the first thing is just to say welcome to our webinar. The session, as you know, will be pre-recorded, but there will be time at the end of the session for questions and answers. And I'd very much like to thank Fisher International for the opportunity to work with teachers in Romania again. It's a pleasure to be here. The outline for today's session is first we're going to do a quick warm-up. Then we're going to talk about the situation of emergency remote teaching. We're going to look at what will happen or what might happen if we go back to school with the COVID situation. And then, as I said before, we'll be looking at questions and answers. This is not my first time working with teachers in Romania. As you can see from the photos, it's been a long time since I've been to your lovely country, but I was there for the Fisher Conference in 2011, where we were treated with a limousine. And I was also there working with teachers in 2012, when I had the opportunity to visit Brasov and the Bram Castle. So I felt very lucky. It was very snowy, but it was a very nice visit. Now, a little bit about your teacher. As you can see here on the slide, there's some information about me. And what you have to do is try to figure out why I put these images on the screen. So you have a photo of me. So obviously that's my name, Nina Lauder. But what about this other information? So I'll just give you a second to think about that. Why is that information there? And what does it represent? So just a moment. Let's see. Got some flags, some numbers, some pictures. So what do you think? Have some ideas? Let's take a look. Well, as you've probably guessed by my accent, I am from Canada. From Canada, where one of our animals that's very common to find in Canada are our raccoons. So here I have Coon to say hello to you all this morning. So I am from Canada. Right next to Canada, you have an image of somebody dancing flamenco. That's because I'm based now in Spain, in the south of Spain, in Seville. And then the rest of the information here, 29. 29 is the number of years I have been teaching. So I started my teaching career in the early 90s in Greece and have very much enjoyed my profession ever since. The other images are of some of the textbooks I've written and worked on, and finally some of my free time activities, which have obviously been changed a bit with the pandemic. But I love reading, which I can still do, love doing sports, which I can do as much as I can, and also did enjoy traveling until all of this pandemic happened. So anyway, that's a little bit about your teacher. And now we're going to go on to do a quick warm-up game you can use in class. So on this next slide, you can see 3 vehicles: a sports car, a tricycle, and a bulldozer. Now you have to decide, which of these vehicles am I? Which of these vehicles is Nina? And why? So I'll just give you a sec. If I were a form of transportation, which one of these 3 would I be and why? Have your ideas? Let's take a look. Okay, so moving on, we have here my answer. And I had said that I relate to being a tricycle, that if I were a vehicle, I would probably be a tricycle because I love being outdoors and I like taking things easy. So, don't know if you guessed correctly or not, but that was our little intro. And now over to you. So on this next slide, you have to think a little bit about what you would be and why. So here we have the option if your birthday is from January to June. If you were a fruit, what fruit would you be and why? And if you were an animal, what animal would you be and why? So this very easy warm-up activity can be used in class. It helps students work on key vocabulary. Before you do the activity, you can brainstorm some key characteristics that they can use. For example, if I were a fruit, I'd be a watermelon because I'm happy and juicy or whatever. Or you might say, if I were an animal, I'd be an eagle because I love overlooking things. So again, before you begin the activity with the students, you can brainstorm transport, animals, fruit, whatever it is, and then brainstorm key characteristics. So that was just a little bit of a warm-up. Unfortunately, I can't find out about you yet. But anyway, I hope you had a chance to think about that and that maybe you can use that in your classes. Perfect. So now, looking at remote learning. And we're just going to start with a quick quote. And as it says here, at the core, education is about nurturing strengths and about growth and learning. So whether we're in the class or teaching online, we need to keep these core values, I think, in our minds. So just something there for us to think about. So moving on, many of us were thrown into emergency remote teaching last spring. And just take a quick look at these people and figure out which number are you, number 1 to 8. So which one best shows how did you feel about emergency remote teaching? So I must admit, in my own case, I was like number 7 at the beginning, like, when I began, but I managed to get more or less to number 3, despite some technical difficulties that I had, and I'm sure you had, when we were dealing with remote teaching. Okay, the next part here, just taking a quick look at what tools you might have used while you were remote teaching. Obviously, there are a number of different platforms, a number of different websites you might have used, but I've just put a few of them here. So we've got Zoom, WhatsApp, Skype, the school platform, email, Microsoft Teams, using PowerPoints that you might have sent the students, Blackboard Collaborate, Adobe Collaborate is another one, Moodle platforms, and many others. So just have a quick think there. If you had a new teacher coming to the school, which of these tools would you recommend? Which ones wouldn't you recommend? Why or why not? So like I said, I've experimented with different ones. They all have their pros and contras, but just something for us to think about and maybe share our ideas at the end of the session. Okay, so looking on to the next part here, as it says, times have changed. The title of the seminar is Teaching in Changing Times. So times have changed, but we still need to think about what students need, what students want, and what students like, regardless of our teaching environment. So these are things just to bear in mind, that no matter how we're teaching, we do need to keep in mind what our students want, need, and like. So, 2 questions here. What has changed? And what stays the same? So just think about that for a moment. With emergency remote teaching, what changed? And what stays the same? So I'll just give you a moment to think about that. What changed? And what remains the same? Okay, got some answers ready? Let's see. Okay, so things that have changed. Obviously, the format of teaching. If we were used to doing face-to-face classes and suddenly we're teaching online, obviously the format of our classes has changed. Also, the focus might have changed. Just like what we're doing now, the communication tasks might be limited in an online situation. We have to think about what focus we might be using or how we might change the format to meet the focus we're aiming at. Obviously our circumstances have changed, that we're not actually in the classroom, so the circumstances have changed for us and the circumstances change for our students. In my case, I was very lucky. The students managed to meet these changes very successfully, but I know that especially for those of you working with very young learners, it was a real challenge, this shift in our circumstances. And then, of course, the amount of parental involvement changed greatly, especially for those of us working with young learners. They might not be as technologically apt. And so sometimes parents had to be more involved than they might have during our daily lives in an in-school situation. Okay, so those were the things that have changed. But now let's look at what stays the same. So looking at what stays the same, well, we're still teachers. Whether we're teaching online, teaching face-to-face, teaching large groups, teaching small groups, teaching in academies, teaching in schools, we're still teachers. We're still creative and we're still hardworking. I think teachers last spring, at least the teachers I've worked with in Spain, made a huge effort to meet these new requirements and new needs. Apart from that, we're all still able to learn. We're able to change. We took on new challenges. Like I said before, we still need to have our main focus, obviously, on educating students, keeping in mind what they want, what they like, what they need, despite this new format. And then, of course, we still need to provide students with meaningful activities, age-appropriate activities, language-appropriate activities, despite a change in circumstances. So, big question. What can we do? What did we do last spring? And what can we do if we are faced with the situation of emergency remote teaching again? So just take a minute to think about what you can do or what recommendations you would give maybe a new teacher coming to your school who isn't familiar with remote teaching. Okay, so just think for a moment there and let's look at some suggestions. Okay, so on this question of what can we do, I've put some suggestions here. So the first one is to explore new ways of teaching online. So we talked about some different platforms. We talked about different web pages. You might want to investigate the idea of using some flipped learning in your class. So explore as much as you can. Of course, we also need to improve learner autonomy. Students are going to be working on their own at home quite often. They might not have English language support at home. So we're going to have to make sure that the activities allow students a chance to grow and learn by themselves and also help them become more autonomous. Another thing we need to do is be resourceful, be creative, be patient with ourselves and with the students and with the parents. On the topic of parents, we should try to provide them with as much support as possible so they can understand what is expected of students at home. Share ideas and resources with other teachers. I think that's very useful. Maybe have a platform at school where you guys can share your ideas. And then, of course, explore educational websites, some of which we will look at in a minute. Okay, so let's look now at some activities you might be able to put into practice in remote learning situations. Okay, the first thing we're going to look at here are our puppets. So this is Lucky from one of the Explorers series, but you can use any puppet, even just a little handmade finger puppet. Oh, a kiss. So you can use puppets for your classes. So I think many of us have an idea of how to use puppets in class, but how can we use puppets online? So just think for a minute. How do you use puppets in your class? And how could you use puppets online? So just have a quick think. Let's look at some ideas. Okay, so here I've listed some ideas for how we usually use our puppets in class. So quite often we use puppets for our daily routine, like what day is it, what month is it, what's the weather like, and the puppet can help us pick the flashcard, or the puppet can help us with our hello, how are you, what's your name routine. Here, where's Lucky, which is the name of the doggy puppet. We could hide the puppet somewhere and then ask the students, where is it? Is it on the desk? Is it under the chair? Is it in my bag? So, using the puppet for a preposition review or for things in the classroom furniture. Another thing that children love doing is dressing the puppet. So of course you can have your puppet and then you can put on a hat or you can put on a jacket so we can dress the puppet. You can do all sorts of drama games with puppets, and then you can talk about how the little puppet feels. So for example, in the case of Coon, well, Coon might be feeling sad or might be feeling happy or might be feeling scared. Oh, poor Coon, he's feeling scared. So we can do all of these things in the class. But of course, if we're teaching remotely, what can we do? So let's look at a few suggestions for how we can use the puppet in remote teaching. So much like what we do in class, the puppet could still be used for things like the daily routine. So you could have a little daily routine chart at home, and the puppet can be used to talk about the weather, or, according to what he's wearing, we could find out what the weather is or how he's feeling, things like that. You can use it for model conversations. So again, if you're at home alone and you don't have anybody to talk to on the cam, you can have the little conversation with the puppet. So you could have, hello, good morning. Hello, how are you? Fine, thank you. So you can have a little conversation with your puppet on screen, or of course you can always have your puppet just telling you secrets that you can tell the class. So we can use it for our daily routines. We can use it for model conversations. You can use the puppet to help you tell a story. You can ask students questions. So instead of you asking the questions, you can have the puppet asking some questions to the students. Or you can ask students to tape themselves, make some video recordings of themselves at home, talking and having a little conversation with their toy or their puppet if they have one at home. So there were just a few ideas for how we might be able to use puppets even when we're working with remote classes. Okay, so moving on. Another thing we can do is using our course books. Quite often we're used to using our course books in the class. So how can we adapt some of the activities to remote teaching? So in this case, the kids are looking at things that come from trees, what things are made of. So things made of wood. So they would be looking at the pictures. You can ask them to do this as an assignment at home. You can explain to the parents what's expected of them. They can mark the things that are made of wood in their books as an activity. And then you can make a quick extension for at-home work. So here, as you can see, if they're exploring the world around them, exploring things at home, what they could do is then find 5 things made of wood at home, and they could take pictures or draw pictures of them. You can give them a worksheet. Draw 5 things made of wood. Draw 5 things made of paper. Draw 5 things made of rubber that you found at home. So again, a homework assignment based on an activity from the textbook, but with this sort of homeschool connection. So I'm sure you have lots of ideas like this as well, but I just wanted to bring up a couple. And then here on the next slide, what we have is a very nice idea from a teacher who works in the Canary Islands. And what she did doing remote teaching was sort of project work on a weekly basis, but each week they chose a country. So she and her students decided on which country they were going to choose, and then different students or different groups of students were assigned the task of finding out what's the popular food there, recording themselves learning some dance steps from the traditional dances. They found out about language, population. So in this case, it was an idea of doing project work over an extended period of time with the students working at home and then sharing the information and finding out what their partners had sent about this country and about the characteristics of the country. The next photo is a friend of mine, Enrique, who teaches in a bilingual school in Spain. In this case, he was teaching in Spanish. But what he did was summaries, very, very clear summaries on his whiteboard in his kitchen, and then using some props, just like we did with the puppet, using a little prop, using a wig, using a crown, using something to make the video a little bit more entertaining. He would, for example, put on his wig, have his fly swatter, and then he would ask different questions to the students based on the summary he had displayed at his house. So just another idea of a creative remote emergency teacher. And then another idea, which I thought was very nice, which was sent to me by a friend who works at an international school in Belgium. When we were sort of mid-pandemic and everybody was getting a bit down, what the teachers did was they made a lovely video sort of congratulating the students, saying how much they missed seeing them every day, saying how proud they were of how hard they were working at home. And so this is just an idea that maybe with the team of teachers, if we find ourselves thrown into this again, and even if we're doing face-to-face classes, really talk to the students about all of the things they did right when we were going through this strange situation for everyone. So I thought this was a very nice idea as well. They made a music video where each of the teachers made a sign to tell the students how they felt and to congratulate them on their hard work. So another thing you can do is investigate and explore ICT resources from publishers. So in this case, I've put up some images from Oxford because this is a book I've worked on and worked with. But of course, any of the main publishing houses now have websites that are associated with their textbooks. So even if you're not using the textbook, you quite often have access to word games, activities, worksheets, digital games. So investigate as much as possible, and then maybe you can use some of these websites for your remote teaching. And again, a lot of publishers now have online workbooks, online textbooks. Like I said, even flipped learning textbooks now with the videos prepared. So investigate what's out there and see what can help you if we are teaching online again. A thing you can also do, which you probably have done already, is explore online materials. Again, most major publishing houses have a YouTube page where you can visit and you can find songs and videos and activities that can be carried out by your learners. So you can perhaps give them a song, ask them to rehearse the song, prepare a little worksheet that has to do with the song, and that can make your classes a little bit more dynamic. So they're not just always watching the teacher doing the class. They can also be watching educational videos that are age appropriate and language appropriate to be working on their own. For older learners, of course, you can also explore easy-to-use apps and easy-to-use web pages. For example, in this case, it's a very nice page for students to create their own mind maps. So very easy, free resource where students can be given the instructions on how to do their mind map, and then they can send their mind map, or you can have them do it in a group where one person adds some information and sends it to the next person and then sends it to the teacher. So again, using online resources for our classes and giving the students as well an opportunity to investigate and work with some different tools. And I didn't design this webinar to sort of give you loads and loads and loads of web pages, but there are number of websites out there. Here's one called Edpuzzle, Padlet. There are so many out there. So again, if you'd like, I can send a list, or you can send me an email and I can send you some more websites that you might want to investigate. But there are loads of resources out there that we can take advantage of for our online teaching. And then also, there's the opportunity to get training from the comfort of your own home. So just like this webinar, there are loads of opportunities to take webinars and do webinars online. There are also lots of recorded videos where you can get online training on how to do synchronous learning or asynchronous learning, how to teach online. So again, investigate as much as you can. If you have a question, I don't know how to do this. Well, there's probably a video online explaining how to do it. And just to end this section, this is a website I feed. This page called Mentimeter is fantastic because you can open it up, you can do a poll, you can ask an open-ended question, you can do a survey, and all you have to do is send the students the web link with the code. They go into the website, they can write their answers, and then you, of course, can display their answers or share their answers and get some valuable feedback from them on how they're doing, what activities they like, what pages they're enjoying the most, and things like that. So just to end this section, there's a quick quote here that says, vulnerability is the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. So as much as we can, we should try to embrace this opportunity to learn more and to find out more about how to use technology in remote teaching. So now, a quick break. I just need you to look like our cat on the screen and have a quick stretch. So just have a quick stretch. It's probably been a long day for you already. So just have a quick stretch. And now we'll move on. Okay, so now we're in our final part of the session where we're going to talk a little bit about going back to school. At least in Spain, we'll be going back to school in the next couple of weeks. And of course, there are lots of questions that need to be answered and lots of things that we need to keep in mind about, again, changing the format of how we work in class and how we work with our students. So going back to this theme throughout the session of how things have changed. So take a look at these photos and have a quick think. How have things changed? So just looking at the images, we have some elbow bumping. So some different things to think about. So how have things changed? Okay, so let's look at some of these changes. Of course, the idea of wearing masks has changed. We have to now wear masks at school, at least in Spain. The idea of classroom layout has changed. We need to disinfect as well in our classes. The idea of social distancing will change the dynamics in our classroom. How students greet one another, with our elbows or other forms of greetings. The use of masks in or out of school, the rules we're going to establish, and then how we're going to manage our classrooms as things will change a lot in these circumstances. So without going into too much detail, as each country and each classroom and each school and each department have their own requirements for this, but just some things that as teachers, we're going to have to keep in mind. Establish clear rules and procedures that will obviously need to be practiced with the students. Consequences for these new rules and what happens if the rules are not met. We also need to think about making sure that our masks are comfortable and breathable. So, we're going to be a long time with masks on at school, at least in the case in Spain. So make sure your mask is comfortable and take mask breaks. We need to think about physical distancing, hand hygiene, disinfecting surfaces, and of course, good ventilation in class, which will become increasingly complicated as the winter months come. So there's a lot on the go now, and hopefully your schools are organized. We're still trying to figure things out here in Spain. Okay. So other things that we need to keep in mind. I've put here voice as one of them, sharing objects as another, the classroom layout, and of course, parents. So 4 sections for us to think about. So in terms of voice, we just need to keep in mind that it's difficult to be heard and understood with a mask on. So when we think about teaching this way, we need to think about how the mask is going to affect our voice, how it's going to affect us being heard, the fact that the students won't be able to have any emotional cues. And of course, if it's not just us with the mask, but if students are also wearing masks, we have to think about how this will affect communication. So it will be recommended that the students work in pairs instead of large groups. And of course, the noise might become a problem. So things to think about: how your voice will be affected using a mask. So just one of the things we need to think about. The other thing we need to think about, and this is tough because with the young learners, of course, we've been telling them for years to share and share your things and share with other people. And then suddenly now with the new circumstances, they won't be able to share as much. So of course, we need to also keep in mind that students will need to have their own classroom materials. Things might need to be disinfected. And of course, another thing that people talk about a lot, especially due to this whole thing with using the masks, is that perhaps we'll have to develop some hand signals. So on this next slide, what we're looking at are some possible hand signals that students could use in class. Again, I'm doing okay, I'm not doing okay, I need to go to the toilet, I have a question, that you might, if the students are using masks, you might have to develop some hand signals. Or if you're wearing a mask, you also might have to develop some hand signals just to make sure that as they're not getting the visual expression on your face, they only have your eyes to look at, just to make sure that they're understanding everything. And then other things to think about, just the classroom layout, as we mentioned before, the distancing between the tables. It might be more difficult to do sort of group work and project work. We might have to do more pair work. And then, just establish very clear norms for students. And of course, keep the parents well informed. What's expected of them, what's expected of the students, just to avoid any possible misunderstandings. Okay, so now we're going to just look very quickly at some possible activities for coming back to school with the class. So this first one is one that I found on a web page, which is included on the slide, but I thought it was quite a nice activity for the younger learners, especially for those in preschool, talking about why the teacher is wearing a mask. And is it a mask for Halloween? Is it a mask for Carnival? What's it there for? And sort of, again, encouraging students to understand that it's still the teacher behind the mask. And then this web page also provided some very nice information for little games and activities that students and teachers can carry out to just show what happens when we wear a mask and how that affects how we look, but it's still us behind the mask. So I just thought I'd send those ideas to you to try. And then here, the New York Times has come up with a very nice sort of illustrated document of how schools will change. So this could be something that you could sit down also and look at with your older learners. This is how they're doing it in the States. How are we doing it here? Why are we taking these measures? And things like that. Just keeping the students informed as much as possible. Perfect. So coming up to the end now, I've given you a couple of worksheets here, again with the web link for you to look at, because they have some lovely resources here. Just things like, oh, I forgot how to keep germs away. How can we help the student decide? And then this lovely idea of the balloon, where the students can write all of the activities they can do. Because obviously we're giving them a lot of sort of prohibitions and a lot of rules, but it's also nice for them to see that we still can do a lot of things with our friends, even though we have some limitations we didn't have before. So I think these are useful things to do the first few weeks of school if you go back to school. Not just ignore the topic and get right back into schoolwork. Give them an opportunity to express their fears, to express their opinions, to talk about what happened, to talk about what's happening. Okay, so yeah, this last idea here are just a few videos, things like songs to teach the kids how to wash their hands, or videos about germs. There's also a very nice experiment. I'm sure you've seen it with the pepper and the soap, and how the soap sort of keeps the germs, which are illustrated by the ground pepper, away. So again, using online resources to help us when we go back to school, to ensure that students understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. And then just as our final quote and our final slide, it says here, tough times don't last. Tough people do. And I think as teachers, we are tough. We have a long work week. We deal with a number of challenges. We've dealt now with 6 months of figuring out how to teach online. So I think we just have to remember how resilient we are, how resilient our kids can be. And so just to, try to make an effort to not give up despite these complicated times. And just here, just a slide with my webpage. If you're interested in finding out more about the work I've done or the books I've written, or if you'd like to keep in touch, my email is there as well. So please feel free to visit the webpage and to send me an email if there's anything you need. And finally, thank you very much for joining us. This is my very first time ever recorded session, so thank you for your patience. And a very big thank you to Fisher for this wonderful event. And I will see you now for the questions and answers period. Well done, everyone. See you, and bye-bye to Koon as well. Bye. So there we go. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.